Go ahead and get this show on the road. So welcome everyone to our webinar, AI Agents Pitfalls, the mistakes that break projects, and how to avoid them. I'm Scott LeFante, a portfolio partner at CongruentX. Over the past few years, I've had the privilege of working with many different organizations as they've navigated the complex world of AI implementations. And I've seen firsthand what separates the success stories from the cautionary tales.
Yeah, my name is McLendon. I'm an AI business process engineer at Microsoft. Between Scott and I, we worked on dozens of AI projects, AI dynamics projects, specifically across different industries, ranging from healthcare to manufacturing to financial services. Today, eh, we're going to share the hard truths, the mistakes that really derail AI agents, and more importantly, how you can dodge them. Um, we're not going to be here to sugarcoat the challenges, but we want to give you the practical roadmaps that you can start using today.
All
Scott, you can
right,
go to the
so
next slide. Oh, there you
absolutely. So
go.
sorry, a little delayed over here. Need some more coffee. But anyway, let me frame, what we're going to cover today with three core themes. First, we're going to embrace AI agents as a tool for measurable business value. These aren't science experiments or IT projects. They're strategic tools that can free up your teams, accelerate decisions, and really help you create real world competitive advantages.
Yeah, and second, we're going to avoid predictable pitfalls, sorry, a little tongue-tied, with the right proven playbook. So the good news is that most failures, they're not mysterious. They're predictable. That means that they can be preventable. And third, start small and refine for a fast to win first mover advantage. You need a 3-year roadmap, or you don't need a 3-year roadmap or a massive project. Uh, you need clarity, discipline, and a willingness to learn as you go. Organizations that move now are the ones that will be leading these industries in the next 18 months.
Yep. So let's go ahead and, I want to be honest real quick. So 70 to 80% of all AI initiatives underperform. So definitely not, I'm not misspeaking. It is 70 to 80%, and it's not a reflection of the technology's capabilities. It's because of how projects are scoped, built, and more importantly, operated. So most organizations approach AI agents with excitement, but without really the discipline required to make them work in production environments.
AI agents can deliver huge value, but they're fragile without the right foundation. They need clean data, clear guardrails, continuous monitoring to stay effective. The good news, the small pitfalls show up again and again. So if you know what to look for, you can avoid them. That's exactly what we're here to help you with today. So,
Yep.
quick audience question. How many of you have seen an AI project in your organization stall or underdeliver? You can be honest, this is a judgment-free zone. How many of you guys have seen that?
Yep. You can either raise your hand or just put in the chat, whatever's easiest for y'all. All right. Well, as we'll go ahead and come back, but if people want to put it in the chat, we'll come back to that, or if anyone has any questions. So most failures fall into these four buckets, right? Unclear use cases, poor data. I always say garbage in, garbage out. Doesn't matter if it's a CRM or AI, right? Weak guardrails and no post-launch plan. These these aren't exotic problems or cutting edge technology failures. I'm sure folks on this call and elsewhere have seen projects fail for a lot of these same reasons, but they're the basic project fundamentals and they're the ones that go wrong. So when we scope a new AI agent, we start by checking these four boxes because if any of them are unchecked, the project is at serious risk before it even begins.
And we've seen it firsthand. Organization gets really excited about the promise of AI, but then they skip the discipline required to make it work. They jump start straight into building without asking the hard questions about data quality, without defining what success looks like, and without thinking through what happens after launch. And that's what causes agents to underdeliver or fail completely. The symptoms are consistent, the risks are predictable, and fortunately, so are the fixes.
All right. So if anyone had to pick, which of these four do you think causes the most failures in your organization, assuming that you have implemented AI or have tried to implement AI? All right. So let's talk about some of the pitfalls when it comes to AI and AI projects. The first one is again going in without a clear use case, right? I call it shiny object syndrome, and it really kills more AI projects than bad code ever will. Right? We've all seen it. Someone reads an article about AI agents, gets super excited and says, "Hey, let's build one," without asking really to do what exactly. What problem is it going to solve? And what other business challenges, could it, fix as well? So without a clear, measurable use case, you end up with a solution looking for a problem, and that never ends well.
Yeah, the fix is really, yeah, pause for a second here because I say the fix is start narrow. You want to do something that defines measurable, and it's low risk. Don't try to solve the entire enterprise situation in one day. Instead, prove value with something that is specific, like automated ticket routing, compliance monitoring, or lead generation or qualification. Pick a use case where success is obvious and you can measure results in weeks, not months, and where risk or failure is really contained or limited. Once you prove value there, you can expand to more complex use cases with confidence.
Yep. So let's go on to number two, right? AI projects are built too often, excuse me. AI projects are built in IT silos. The business stakeholders aren't involved in the design. They don't understand how the agents work. And when it rolls out, adoption tanks because no one trusts it or sees its value, right? We call this the IT builds it and throws it over the fence problem, right? How many of you have seen that before in other projects, right? Where they're IT driven and the business just has to accept what it is. It's a recipe for failure every single time. And we've seen it. I mean, I've been in this industry for 20 something years, CRM and AI, and I've seen it time and time again.
Yeah, alignment is the cure. Co-design with business stakeholders from day one, tie the agency directly to measurable business outcomes, and it makes sure that people who will use it are involved in shaping it. When you do that, suddenly the agent is seen as a partner and a productivity tool. So it's not a pet project or a treat. Uh, it's something that the business wants to adopt, and because they put the time, effort, and sweat equity into helping with making it successful. So business alignment, it isn't just a nice to have, it's a difference between adoption and abandonment.
Yep. And from a AI initiative or anything else in the audience, who typically drives your initiatives? Is it IT, business, or a mix of both? And is that working? Or do you see any opportunities to improve collaboration? All right, number three, bad or incomplete data, right? Bad data equals bad agents. It's truly that simple. If your data is dirty, siloed, incomplete, or inconsistent, your agent will, hallucinate, produce unreliable outputs, and really erode trust from your user community faster than you can say machine learning, for example. I mean, we've seen the organization spend months building sophisticated agents only to watch them fail in production because the underlying data was never ready for AI in the first place.
So here's the hard truth. The fix to this is boring, but it's essential. You need to prioritize clean, contextual, and complete data sources. Make sure that the agent knows what data is relevant, what's been excluded, and give it reasons why it's been excluded. You need to establish data governance as well. So the agent isn't pulling from outdated data sources or conflicting sources, more importantly, authorized sources. And garbage in still means garbage out. So no amount of sophisticated prompting or model tuning can fix fundamentally bad data. Get this right, and you'll save yourself months of frustration.
Yeah. Well said, Will. So let's go on to number 4, right? An agent, and I said this in a conference last week. An agent without guardrails is extremely dangerous. It can take actions it shouldn't, make compliance missteps, access data it really shouldn't either, right? And it shouldn't see it. So that loses user trust in basically a blink of an eye. Guardrails aren't about limiting the agent's usefulness. They're about making sure it operates within acceptable boundaries so that you can scale it with confidence instead of fear.
That's why we say guardrails are the seatbelts and brakes of AI agents. Define what the agent can't do. Require approvals for high-risk actions. Keep comprehensive audit trails, and always have a human override for critical decisions. You wouldn't put a car on the road without brakes, and you shouldn't put an agent into production without guardrails. It's not just good practice in many industries, it's a regulatory requirement, so it has to be done.
Yeah,
So question,
absolutely. Well, go ahead, go for the question.
what's one decision you've never let an AI agent make on its own? For example, fire an employee, approving a large contract, or deleting customer data. What's one you would never let an agent do on its own?
Yeah, I'd be curious about this because I'm sure if everyone's been on LinkedIn, you're seeing lots of complaints about AI doing some interesting things, including weeding out really good candidates because it's set up poorly, right? I've seen people apply for jobs time and time again, and they're like, "Well, in some cases maybe even overqualified, and yet I'm immediately getting ruled out." So that's an example of really not having those guardrails and really a good AI agent in place with instructions. All right, let's go to number 5. All right, and so here's skipping that sort of that feedback loop. Excuse me. So here's a really big classic mistake, which is launch it, the AI, and forget about it. Teams push an AI agent live, and then, hey, great, we've done it. Pat ourselves on the back, celebrate the win, and then really never measure its performance or refine it based on real world usage. So getting that feedback is huge. And without continuous monitoring, even a well-designed agent will drift over time as your systems change, your data changes as well, right? User needs evolve, for example, and edge cases appear that you didn't anticipate during the design and testing phases.
Yeah. So without dashboards, APIs, and structured user feedback, performance slides, like all these things erode trust. And eventually the agent becomes a liability instead of an asset. And that's the exact opposite of what we want, right? Agents need continuous tuning to stay sharp. They need to be accurate. They need to be trusted. So that feedback loop is critical. So set up monitoring from day one. You want to establish clear metrics for success. Even create a feedback loop where users can report issues and suggest improvements. The feedback is gold. It's what's going to really keep your agent relevant and effective over time.
Yeah. So here's a quick question for everyone. How does your organization usually capture feedback on new tools or systems, right? It could be things like formal surveys, getting direct input from various folks within the user community, or are you really not doing it all, right? And is that process working well enough if you're going to, say, for example, implement AI initiatives? All right. And so we come to pitfall 6, which is our last pitfall. Again, there could be plenty more, but this is really our top 6. that Will and I have come up with, and is having no owner after launch, right? So think about this: the project goes live, and everyone's excited, right? The team moves on to the next priority, um, which is great. That's what needs to happen, right? But then the responsibility for the agent just disappears into the void, right? Nobody monitors it, nobody's refining it. And when something breaks or changes in the underlying systems, the agent fails silently and nobody even notices until users start complaining. That is a massive recipe for disaster.
So what's the fix? It's simple. In one word, it's ownership. You need to assign someone, a team, a role, a clear accountability structure who can be responsible for the agent's ongoing refinement, that monitoring, and quite frankly, the evolution that we mentioned earlier with that feedback loop. So treat it like you would any other business, critical business system, because that's exactly what it is. Without that ownership, without that accountability, the agent will fail silently over time, and all the value you built will erode. So ownership isn't optional. It's essentially everything for a long-term success implementation for these agents. So who owns AI in your organization right now? Is it the IT? Is it IT? Is it business? Is it a dedicated AI team? Or maybe no one in particular? Who would you guys say? And is it clear to everyone? Um, or is it ambiguous?
Okay, let's see one for IT. And I'd be curious too, is if it is IT, um, or even the business, right? Is there a loop in for the other the other parts of the organization? So for example, if it's IT that's owning it, are they engaging the business to really understand the use cases that will drive and add value? Just something to think about,
Hmm.
right? So how do we go ahead and avoid these pitfalls and set ourselves up for success, right? And so the answer is to use a playbook, right? And in particular, Will and I have come up with a playbook that has 5 steps, right? Which is, we're starting small and scaling fast, right? Building those guardrails from day one, integrating agents into existing workflows instead of siloing them, right? Iterating continuously with user feedback and assigning clear ownership from the beginning, right? These aren't, I want to make this clear, these aren't theoretical principles. They're battle tested practices from dozens of successful implementations that Will and I and our organizations have completed in the past.
Yeah. This isn't complicated, guys, but it does require, again, discipline. It's easy to skip steps when you're excited or under pressure to deliver. We've all been there, but that's exactly when discipline matters the most. So what we do is we follow these 5 steps and you dramatically improve your chances of building an agent that delivers measurable value, really earns the trust of the organization, and really scales successfully across the entire enterprise organization. If you skip them, then you're setting yourself up for one of the 6 pitfalls we just covered.
I see a question. Can you skip a little more on integrate, don't silo? How can you expand a little bit more on integrate, don't silo? Yeah, the big thing there is, again, you want to look at your existing um, your existing data points, your existing use cases, and your different uh, departments within the organization, and build them to scale, right? So we don't want to go ahead, for example, and have IT look at some of their what they think are their use cases or the data that's important. You really want to involve the particular departments where the AI agent is going to be developed for, and understand what their use cases are, understand what their data that they're looking at is, instead of making assumptions. And so, well, I don't know if you have anything to add to that, but that's my take on it.
No, you nailed it. You nailed it pretty well. And we also have another question. Basically, how how are the guardrails should be specified in the instructions of an agent created in Copilot Studio. Do we have an example of this? So when we're saying guardrails, you can definitely define, define instruction, details in the instruction section in Copilot Studio, but we're talking about more or less those kind of hard guardrails. So having a governance policy, the DLP policies in play when we're talking about building, making sure that the knowledge bases and or slash data sources are valid and approved data sources. Also, using things and tech, features within Copilot Studio like topics to kind of guide that conversational path, so you prevent hallucinations or letting the LLM kind of guess what kind of request or response it should give. So basically, these guardrails are implemented during the development process, and they walk in line with any of your infosec team or security team. So it applies to the governance policies and also the instructions and also things like topics.
Excellent. Well said.
All right,
All
let's
right.
go to the next one.
Yep, I see another question, and it would definitely will come back to that. I just want to make sure we go through all the slides here. So, here's your gut checklist. Before you launch any AI agent, ask yourself these 5 questions, right? Is the use case clear and measurable, right? Is the data ready and trustworthy? Do you have those guardrails defined and enforced? Again, do we have that feedback loop in place? And most importantly, right, who owns this after launch? So we've seen these in some of the slides. You're starting to see a recurring theme here, right? But these 5 questions will surface the vast majority of risks before they become problems for you.
Yeah, and if you can't answer yes to all 5, you found a clear risk. The good news is you found it instead of, before launch. You found it before launch instead of after launch, right? So uh, it's much more expensive and embarrassing to fix after you pushed it into production, right? So you want to go back, address the gap, and move forward before launch. This checklist, it's not slowing you down, right? It's just basically telling you to stop and think for a second. It's about helping you move fast with confidence, instead of just moving fast towards failure, right? So you use it every time you're evaluating a new agent. You'll also avoid some of the common reasons that projects fail.
So what are our next steps? Right. So again, launch your first AI agent in 30 days, which we shared in our last webinar, right? Using that playbook that we shared today. Don't overthink it. Don't wait for perfection or perfect conditions. Just pick a narrow use case, apply the principles that we've discussed, and start learning. Keep that learning through our upcoming webinar as well. We have another one coming up, which is day 2 operations, and that's where we'll go deeper on monitoring, refinement, and scaling our AI. Right, and there's various white papers that we have and community resources that we have and can share to stay connected and learn from others who are on that same journey.
Yeah. The key here is action. Don't let this just be another webinar you attend and forget about it, right? The sooner you start, the sooner you learn, the sooner you, build muscle memory around what works in your specific environment. Organizations, again, that act now, they'll be the ones that will have a 12 to 18-month head start on their competitors. So download the white paper, join the community, register for the next session, and most importantly, start building.
All right, so we're gonna wrap up here, but I do see some questions, so we're definitely gonna get to the questions. But to wrap up, AI agents aren't hype. They are real tools for measurable value. They don't replace human interaction and human intervention, right? But if you avoid the mistakes that we've covered today, right, you're going to see a big difference between success and failure, right? And that isn't about having the best technology or the biggest budget, right? We've seen, Will and I have seen budgets from small to large, and it really depends on those use cases. And like we said, start small and start with one use case, right? It's about having that discipline to start small, build those guardrails, and align with business stakeholders. Use clean data, right? And then also, continuously refine based on feedback.
Yeah, the winners will be organizations that start small, refine fast, and honestly, they never lose their appetite for learning. So they'll be the ones that treat AI agents as strategic tools, not science experiments. They'll be the ones that build trust with users by being transparent. They set expectations, but they consistently deliver real value, measurable value. So from me and Scott, thank you for joining us today. We'll see you in the AI agent community, and we're excited to hear about the success and awesome things that you build.
Yep. So again, just go ahead and embrace the AI agents as a strategic tool to drive measurable business value. This isn't about keeping up with trends or checking a box on your digital transformation roadmap. It's really about creating real competitive advantage by automating repetitive work, accelerating decision making, and really freeing your people up to focus on high value activities that require human judgment and creativity.
Again, we just want you to avoid the common pitfalls we discussed by following that proven playbook. That's going to really unlock organization's transformative powers in AI. And I want you guys to kind of stay ahead and be competitive. So the technology is ready, the use cases are proven, and that playbook is clear. So what's really just missing is the adoption on your side. So action, really. So start small, prove value, refine and scale, and that's how you're going to win.
Yep. So before we close out today, and again, we're going to get to the questions that we see in there. I want to make sure you don't miss the final webinar in the series. So this was a 3-part series. This was number 2. And so what we covered today, again, is just the second piece of the puzzle, right? The pitfalls, right? On November 18th, we're going to shift gears and show you AI agent use cases that actually drive revenue, and how to connect the dots between triggers, data, and outcomes that matter to your bottom line.
Yep, they if you found this session, I'm excited about that, Scott. My apologies. So if you
Yeah,
found today's
no,
session valuable, the next part that's going to give you the final pieces of the framework and real world plays. You can kind of move faster, use to move faster with fewer surprises. You'll see not that it works, but why it works, all right? And how you can apply it in sales, service, marketing to deliver measurable ROI. So don't wait. Uh, Head to the resources .congruentx.com/events and register. That way, you get the reminders and materials that we'll be sharing.
and just one thing to remember, right? AI is moving very fast, and we're building or have built this series to really help you stay ahead of the curve instead of playing catch up.
Yeah, but you know what, Scott? We'd love to continue the conversation with everyone here, but I think they're going to have to wait for part 2 and part 3.
Yep. And so I do see another question here, which is, doesn't, we're talking about silo data. And so doesn't that pose a challenge of agent having access to too much data while also being irrelevant for a lot of people? By having specific agents for specific teams, can we not focus on what is most relevant to them, even if it comes across as siloed? Absolutely. I mean, so when we talk about silo, we're really just talking about involving the relevant teams and relevant data for those specific use cases. It's not necessarily, organization wide. And I've seen that where, it's one agent that goes across, multiple use cases, multiple groups within an organization, and it becomes, massively wild. So definitely you can have multiple agents, and I would definitely recommend that. I'm sure, Will, you would too. But you still don't want to, you can silo the data per se, but you don't want to, you need to ensure that you're involving all the groups that are relevant, and so that you're not siloing yourselves into a corner in terms of, hey, what is this agent going to do? What problems is it going to solve? You want to make sure that you're involving the right groups for that particular agent in those particular use cases. And so, Will, I don't know if you have any parting parting comments on that before we let everyone go?
No, you covered it pretty well. We're already at the top of the hour, so we'll go ahead and
All
wrap
right.
up.
All right. Awesome. Well, thank you everyone for your time today. Really appreciate it. We hope that we see you on the next webinar and have a wonderful day. Thank you all.